There's a lot of questions as to where Miura would go after the Sea God segment. Would Guts and the team continue to battle various sea monsters and demons on the way to the Elf Island? Would there be confliction and drama aboard the boat itself? Would Roderick and Farnese finally hook up in the captain's quarters? Well, sadly, no. Or would the story shift focus back to Griffith and Falconia? This is probably the most separated that Guts and Griffith have ever been, and without some sort of massive detour in the script, they would have no reason to meet up again, at least not at this point. Instead, Miura does none of the above and unexpectedly throws us back into the past, giving us an image of Guts with things that we haven't seen in a long time. Him with both eyes and both arms. However, Miura did decide to keep his current drawing style and give young Guts a much more defined jawline than we've ever seen him have in the past. As much as you try to de-age your character, you can't get rid of that manly chin that you have developed since then. So Guts here is presented as a lone mercenary being captured by the enemy. He is clearly older than when we see him part Gambino's camp, so this mini-story within the Fantasia arc takes place technically in the Golden Age arc, within the 4-year time skip of when Guts killed Gambino and ran away from his mercenary group, and before he wound up defeating the great Bazuzo and getting noticed by the Band of the Hawk and Griffith to begin with. So Guts is somewhere between 11 and 15 years old here. If I had to guess, I would put him very close to before he met the Hawks, nearing 15, just given his looks. Miura does a good job of making Guts look like a teen again, but he definitely doesn't look like a child. He's just too damn manly. Anyway, I'm going to assume this is one of his last adventures before finally meeting up with Griffith and the Band of the Hawk. But here Guts is captured, assumingly losing a battle that he was hired to participate in, and a line I really like in the translation is Guts talking about mercenaries and asking why God would care anything about them. And knowing what we do know about the Berserk lore and how all this negativity and violence and chaos within humans fuels the very idea of evil that is manipulating fate itself, it's pretty ironic. You would expect God to be a loving figure that would detest men like these, and yet the only idea of a godlike figure that we've seen has been born of and thrives upon the negativity that men like them create. Behind Guts is another merc, but one Guts seems not to know and who won't shut up. He also attempts to help Guts onto his feet, to which we are reminded of a time that Guts hated to be touched by anybody. A lingering sense of trauma left behind, no doubtedly, by Donovan, the one who molested him as a child and whom his only father figure allowed to have happen. And that's the thing we need to remember about this segment. We are dealing with a Guts that has had nobody worth trusting in his life, constantly hurt and betrayed, and assumingly for the last 4 years, a lone wanderer, distant and unable to connect with anyone or anything, long before his band of travelers on the boat, long before the Band of the Hawk, and before the love that he would feel for Casca. However, the man continues to try to aid Guts to his feet, and even gets the soldiers to back off a bit. At some point, Guts realizes that he is too wounded to continue to walk due to an arrow wound on his back, and agrees to lean on the old man. He continues to rattle on about the life of mercenaries and how they don't fight for any specific thing, but could potentially meet people worth fighting for. Words that come off seemingly wise, but none that Guts cares to hear about at this age. However, during this conversation, of which the man speaks his name of Martino, he picks the lock on Guts' wooden shackles. He then tells Guts to make a run for it, and that he can't reach his own locks, but he wants Guts to be free. After Guts agrees to repay him someday and books it down the edge of the cliff, the soldiers immediately notice and fire arrows after him, while Martino, who lied about his own shackles, slips free and uses the distraction of Guts to make his own getaway, proving once again to the young man that every time he puts a sliver of trust into someone, it is betrayed. Guts is as much a product of his own environment as anybody else. His guard is constantly up, and when put down, he is proven right that he should have had it up in the first place. The tragedy of Guts and of the world that he lives in is that there is never any guarantee that his wish will be their wish. This is why opening yourself up is so terrifying, and why I find the juxtaposition of this in the Wounds chapters so beautiful. But Guts is still a few years away from that. Instead, he remembers the words of Gambino, that to survive on the battlefield you can only rely on your own strength and your own wits, that the battlefield is just that, and that people will do horrible things just to survive. His words, do not trust anyone. which to me is not completely bad advice, especially if you relate the entire world and life itself as the battlefield. However, constant distrust and refusal to ever open up or release perpetuates a dark and distrustful world and creates more people just like Martino, just like Gambino, and just like the original Black Swordsman persona. How does the idea of evil thrive? And I'm not talking about a god of the Berserk universe, I just mean in general it's a snowball effect. Drowning yourself in that negative energy, depleting yourself, and depleting Guts to the point where he doesn't even care whether or not he drops dead, freezing cold and starving, and yet he still covers himself up. And he still bites into a rat just to keep himself alive. First of all, I'm really glad Guts didn't get the plague from this, but I guess it's still a few years too early for that. But also, just like every time Guts is on the verge of death, he struggles and continues to fight on, no matter what. As when he was a child bleeding out and surrounded by wolves, he could have given up and died, but he decided to raise his sword instead. That something within Guts, the human will to keep going, is there. To be strong is to keep fighting, and it may never be a fight that you win, and if you think about it, you won't. We are all gonna die someday. But it's not about winning the fight, it's about fighting it. So long as there is breath in his body, he will continue to fight. To represent this feeling, upon the cold, dark, and uncaring floor beneath him, sprouts a single flower. That single flickering hope within the darkness of reality. And as Guts lays on the ground, we see a little glowing figure right next to the flower, watching Guts as he wakes up. The vice count that captured him and his guards come into the cell and inspect Guts and let him know that he will battle the count's son and lose, as an attempt to give his son more confidence in battle, an example of rich nobles exploiting the weak and the poor. It's kind of like putting an animal in an enclosed area and giving someone a big-ass gun. Somehow this helps bolster someone's ego when really they couldn't be more pandered to. As a result, they decide to not feed Guts as they want him as weak as possible during the fight. So Guts collapses back on the ground, staring again at that single flower, and the little creature that appears behind it. Now, at this point in the story of Berserk, the astral and physical worlds are mostly completely separate, with only the occasional crossover, and I'm sure the full moon still would bring out a stronger connection. Guts' first time really seeing anything supernatural is in a few years when he would first come face to face with motherfucking Zod! Sorry, I had to throw that in there. But again, that's still a ways away. And keeping consistent with the continuity, we can't have Guts comprehend anything supernatural that he would see in this flashback. But Miura does a good job in conveying Guts being so weak and tired to the point where the meeting between them feels more like a dream or like a hallucination on his part. The hallucination introduces herself as Chit, the spirit of the flower. And I think there's some confusion on whether or not Chit is an elf. There's an argument to be made just by her appearance, but she introduces herself as a spirit of the flower. As well, her life is attached to this very flower, which is something we've never seen from any other elf that we've encountered in the series. Also, her powers and abilities and how they work are very different from what we've seen from the other elves. Chit actually thanks Guts for eating the rat, since the rat was going to eat the flower, and if the flower were to die, so would she. Chit adorably speaks in third person and wants to repay Guts for unknowingly helping her. She isn't able to unlock the cell like he wants, but she is able to get water for him and use her ability to, much like the flower, absorb nutrients from the sun's rays and reflect it towards Guts, warming him and healing him. She is even able to take a leaf from her flower to apply to Guts' wounds, which help heal him as well. So even though it's a healing ability, it is much different from that of an elf's. But it is a reaffirmation to us that there are various positive astral beings that do exist, as humanity was blocked off to all of them, both the bad and the good. And like good and bad, Chit mentions the rise and fall of the sun, how the positive rays feel so good, but the darkness feels just as bad. To me, I think this symbolizes the fluctuation between the trust and betrayal for Guts. As good as the trust can feel, the darkness of betrayal feels equally bad, and both will continue to exist regardless of what you do. Chit is bound to her flower, unable to leave this world of alternating dark and light and the feelings associated with them. Her and Guts have much in common, and more in common than that is the eventuality that they will be alone once more, as Chit worries that Guts, like many others, will leave the cell and she will be by herself once more. Guts too has learned that often, and as we the readers know in the future, he will be alone again and again. Sensing this connection between them, Guts comically grabs a hold of Chit, squeezing her cheeks. And yes, I mean the ones on her face, you perverts. More uncertain on whether or not this is truly a hallucination. For Guts senses the commonalities between them, and though Guts isn't some great philosopher, he could still understand that this could be a manifestation of his insecurities. But taking the chance that Chit might be real, he tells her that he will take her flower to a field where there are many just like them, so she will be able to live outside the cell, outside of isolation. So happy about this news, Chit dances and continues to aid Guts' wounds, taking leaf after leaf over to his body to help him feel better. When Guts awakes the next morning, he feels stronger and healed, but Chit is nowhere to be found. Looking at the flower in the cell, it is now no more than a stem limped over. All the leaves have been removed. As Guts states picking it up, she didn't care about the consequences and tearing off all of her leaves to help somebody else. And think about this relating to Guts. Guts in the present timeline has consistently maimed and broken his own body to help someone else. More similarities between the two of them, Guts' body has many scars, and he is actively losing his senses with the continued use of the Berserker armor. At the expense of his own body, he has been trying to heal Casca. Casca showed him the way out of his own cell, as Guts was willing to do for Chit. And like Chit, Guts may wind up giving so much of himself that there is nothing left to give. Guts takes what remains of the flower and puts it in his pocket. Then Guts is brought into the battle arena. He has given his armor back, and it's kind of cool to see his old helmet back again in the manga, but he's also handed a tattered sword that can barely cut, while the Viscount's son is of course decked out head to toe in heavy armor and fighting with a huge mace. Thanks to Chit, Guts is healed enough to keep his wits about him, but he's still not up to full strength, and of course there's the issue of what he has to work with. But remembering advice from Gambino on the battlefield, Guts opts to use his sword not to swing, but as an item of pressure to grapple the sun to the ground, and then in classic Guts fashion, he swings the hilt into the sun's eye like an axe. Guts takes the rich boy hostage, and everyone begins to draw their weapons and point their arrows at him. As Guts grapples with the boy, the Chit flower flies out of his possession. Guts instinctively reaches out to retrieve it, and that very action is which causes Guts to narrowly miss getting hit by a couple of arrows. The funny part is the sun is the one that gets hit, but this could have been a power of Chit, still existing within the flower, and still helping, still continuing to aid even after all the leaves have fallen off. Or it could have been mere coincidence. After that, chaos ensues, as the arena falls under an arrow assault themselves. Breaking into the arena are a group of mercenaries led by Martino. He and Guts recognize each other, and make no mistake, Martino is not here to save Guts. He had no idea whether Guts would be alive or not. He's here to continue whatever job that he was paid for to attack and siege this castle. Saving Guts is something he considers to be a happy accident. But Guts completely ignores him, instead searching for the flower that escaped his grasp. He finds it on the ground, stepped on and broken completely. And yet, despite Chit not being here to communicate, despite the flower losing all of its leaves and being bent and broken, despite not knowing if Chit was even real or not, Guts still travels with the flower, alone, to the field of flowers he had promised to bring her to. He waits, perhaps trying to find some glimpse of her, to hope that the spirit is still with him somehow, but she doesn't arrive. Even so, Guts lets the flower go, to be one with the rest of them, staring into the sky, wondering if Chit was real, or truly a hallucination. But I think Guts recognized the similarities between them. Even if she wasn't real, Guts had to bring her here and let her be at peace. Maybe if he could do that, then that means that someday he could be at peace as well. Maybe there's a field of flowers for him. And maybe there's a place that even when the sun sets on him once more, he will be surrounded by love and care, of others like him. Maybe if Guts continues to struggle and continues to move into that sunlight, even if the darkness is so much stronger, and maybe even if he loses all of his leaves in the process, that it will still be okay. And the one he wanted to help will be able to continue to walk as well. And that will do it for Spring Flowers of Distant Days, a odd little side story packed into the Fantasia arc, but one that I feel has a lot of meaning for Guts' character. And I feel like it was nice to kind of go back and get away from the Astral World merger for a while and see how life was back in the human physical world, and how this is going to relate to Guts moving forward. There are a lot of theories out there of if Chit will return, but I do believe that she actually did die within this segment, because I do believe it's a parallel to Guts' life. That's just my theory, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below. As always, I really appreciate you guys watching these videos. Thank you for the support. Thank you for sticking around and supporting me on this channel. It really does mean a lot to me. I want to let you guys know every opportunity I get that I don't take it for granted, and I really, really, truly appreciate it. So thank you for watching this video, guys. That'll be it for this chapter of the manga analysis. In the next episode, we're going to see a character that we have not seen for a long time, and he makes a great comeback. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you then.